Commence primary ignition.
I'm just not the hero type, clearly.
What a piece of junk.
Enterprise, this is the captain.
I got a bad feeling about this.
It's all part of the plan.
Engage.
Welcome back to Podcast 2 for 1. I'm your host, Donovan Thompson, with my co-host,
Daniel Wingfield.
And today is episode 216 of Podcast 2 for 1, youtube.com/@2for1studios. And if you didn't know, listeners, let's be honest, you probably did not. We are sponsored by Kapow Comics, located at 4047 Eastville Avenue in Sherwood, Arkansas. There they have comic books, collectibles, graphic novels, and of course, special guest appearances throughout the year.
Kapow.
Wow. Kapow. And if you didn't know, if you weren't on the YouTube channel, we are greeted by Dr. Bruce Hutchinson.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. This is the first time I've done more of like the shorter review episode rather than our really long in-depth analysis. So this is cool. First time for me.
I agree. I think
technically we did start our relationship with 1917 and then an Oscars discussion, but it was longer episode.
It was a longer episode. Yeah.
It was for sure. And today we are talking Alien Romulus, directed by Fede Alvarez. All three of us got to see this. I think the second weekend it was out, or the first weekend it was out, and so we saw it together, and I said, hey, we need to go on a podcast together and do a review for it. And we had a little discussion after the movie, but now we've had time to sit down and digest our thoughts and think about it more and live with it more. And I kind of want to go around the room real quick and get everyone's initial thoughts. And if for the listeners who don't know, a little experience or history, or your history with the Alien franchise so far. And let's start with you, Bruce.
Well, I've seen all the Alien movies. I'm a huge fan of the Alien franchise. I love them all. Do you want me to give my initial thought as well?
Yeah.
So it was interesting. I have to do a mea culpa on this one because when we went to see Deadpool and Wolverine, they had the trailer for this movie, and Daniel turned to me and asked me what I thought, and I was like, yeah, I don't think that looks too good. And my fear was that it was going to just sort of be kind of a reboot of Alien, but with newer technology and sort of the same kind of running around the hallways, which is sort of what was in the trailer. Maybe I'll criticize the trailer a little bit. But it turned out the movie was a lot more than that. I enjoyed the movie a lot. I haven't quite figured out where I would put it in the overall pantheon of Alien movies, but I think I probably would put it in my top three, probably after the first two. I was pleasantly surprised and very impressed. So yeah, that's my quick take.
Yeah. So the loyal listeners will know my Alien history because we just finished, not a month or two ago, going through Alien and Aliens on the pod with Bruce, which was a blast. And I did get to see Covenant. No, I'm sorry. And I did get to see Prometheus before we went into Romulus. And I'll say that I really enjoyed Romulus. I know some of the issues that you guys maybe have with it. I wonder if I was spared those because I didn't watch all the Alien movies before I got to it. But either way, I thought it was really good. I thought the horror was good. I thought the characters were good. I felt like we were able to connect with them well. And, I did like, I liked some of the lore drops. I liked some of we're continuing to build this larger world, or, continuing to kind of build out the Alien universe and acknowledge things that have happened before. There's something that makes it all feel a little more like a real alternate world, I guess, in that way. And I enjoyed that part. But yeah, I really enjoyed the movie. In fact, I told Donovan, I think that night or the next day, I was like, man, I want to play something that feels like Alien. And so I ended up picking up Starfield, which came out last year, but I picked it up again because it has a very chunky, kind of hard sci-fi, grungy sci-fi feel to it. And there's straight up an enemy in there called a terrormorph, which is very clearly, I know it's not even, they're not even trying to hide it. And it was just like, yeah, I feel like I'm an alien right now. So I obviously I got into these films because I wanted to do it with you guys, and because they're such iconic movies. I wanted to kind of have that reference. But I'm finding myself just to be a fan of the universe and the films. And that's surprising to me because I'm just not usually a horror person, but I don't know. I've been really enjoying it. So yeah, I was a big fan of Romulus.
Small antidote before I give my initial reaction is I just beat Alien Isolation yesterday, I believe, or 2 days ago, and it's a it's pretty accurate in terms of the world and the lore. It's first person horror game, and the alien just basically stalks you the entire game. And it takes place in between Alien and Aliens. It's some people consider it canon, and even actually the director Fede Alvarez said he took some inspiration from the game and put it into the movie, which the end of the game is kind of the end of that movie, actually, which I was kind of like, man, they really have taken a lot of different things from different things. But the game itself, real quick, it's too long. It's 20 hours total. It should be like 10 hours. But the coolest part was like this extra DLC where you get to go back and play the end of Alien. And you're Ripley and you're on the Nostromo. You can even play Dallas and all those guys. And Sigourney Weaver came back and did additional dialogue for the game. So that's pretty cool. Alien Romulus. Yeah, I agree with Bruce. It's probably my third favorite right behind Alien and Aliens. Watching it, I was pleasantly surprised by it, and I love the performances. The cinematography was great. I love seeing the xenomorph. I'm just a huge fan of that design. I do have some issues with just some of the blatant references. Um, just more about dialogue choices versus things like peppering in information about Prometheus, which I was really that's what I told Daniel, like, hey, I didn't think you had to watch Prometheus before this movie, but now I kind of think it would enhance your experience a little bit.
Yeah.
Which really surprised me that they were actually referencing that. But overall, I really enjoyed it, and I think that considering all the times I have been hurt by the Alien franchise, this is as good as it's going to get right now. And I think this might even be a stepping stone to even a better Alien film next. You get the old fans on board who might have some nostalgia, but then also you bring in new fans, but then maybe next time you can be even more creative with it. But yeah, I kind of want to piggyback off one thing you said, Bruce, was you watched the trailer and you were afraid that this is going to be more of the same, right? And my question to you is then, okay, but Alien 3, Resurrection, they all kind of have a similar formula, at least a setting where they're inside some type of confined space. Are being chased by the alien. So what was the surprise from you, like watching the movie versus, oh, this is what my initial reaction was from the trailer?
Well, first of all, I'd say there's two things that struck me as I watched it. The first was that it felt like it expanded the universe. That is, so often when we're in the other Alien movies, now the second Alien movie, Aliens, we do catch Ripley sort of back on Earth for a while, but we don't really get a sense of what Earth is like, and I don't know if that was a budget issue, but they're always inside, they're always in people's quarters or in conference rooms in the stuff we get at the beginning. And in most of the movies, like you said, we're actually on a ship, in an enclosed space. We actually don't start that way. In the first act, we're on a planet, we're on this sort of mining planet, and we really get a sense a little bit more of the politics. I've always wanted sort of more of Weyland-Yutani in terms of them being they're always sort of this lurking secondary villain in the background. But I've always wanted just to see them get pushed forward a little bit. And I felt like this movie did this, where we see these characters, our main character, Rain, played by Kaylee Spaney, who's fantastic, by the way. She's basically a slave on this planet, right? I mean, she's an indentured servant, and she's sort of working off hours to try to get off planet. And then the moment she's done it, they change the number of hours that's required. But you get a sense of what a world looks like, you get a sense of how people are existing in this universe, and what their relationships are like, and what it is like to be in that world. And then I think the second half is that, like, once we sort of get on, our enclosed space, which in this case is a space station, one is it's bigger than some of the other spaces that we've been in, especially in the first Alien. But when I saw the trailer, it just looked like people running down corridors, which very much felt like the first Alien. And so that made me really think, okay, if it's just a horror movie where they're being stalked down corridors by the aliens and they're jumping, and we're getting jump scares and stuff, that's not going to give me very much. But we really get a sense of not just being in the space, but the space station is in space, and so we have a whole thing at the end where the space station is sort of stuck in space, but it begins falling out of orbit and it's falling into the rings of this planet, and so things are happening outside of the spaceship or the space station as well as inside the space station. So I think I thought it was just going to be this claustrophobic repeat of Alien, but it really did feel like a more open movie, and like there were things happening in various places. There was things inside the space station, outside the space station, on the planet, and I really appreciated that. I felt like we were in a slightly bigger world, which is something I also liked about Prometheus. I would say Prometheus shares that in that it kind of opened things up a little bit more than maybe Alien and Aliens. And I still love those movies, but again, what I was scared of was just getting another version of that was maybe not going to be as good, just with like more contemporary CGI and
you
visual
were
effects
afraid
and
of
stuff.
getting The Force Awakens in an Aliens movie.
Maybe
right?
so.
Right.
Maybe
like
so.
it's just the plot, but different characters.
Right,
again,
right.
Kind of.
And we'll talk a little bit about that in a different way, maybe later on, in terms of the references that Donovan was talking about. But yeah, that was kind of my fear, and that's the way I think the movie kind of relieved that fear. It was just a much bigger movie, I think, than the trailer led me to believe it was going to be.
I think one thing the movie did too that was kind of unique to the Alien franchise was typically, like, say, Alien or Aliens, any of the Sigourney Weaver movies, it's typically her arriving to a group of people, and then it's that
Mhm.
relationship being
Yeah.
established throughout the rest of the movie. Versus here, we have our protagonist who you say is on this planet and her robot, basically surrogate brother, and
Right.
we already had that relationship there, and you already feel empathy for both these characters and how they're treated and where the situation is, and you want to see them get out already. And so
Yeah.
I think that, and then having that, it's interesting because it's like this might be or it feels like the youngest group of people that's had to deal with the aliens. Like they feel like more late high school, early college kind of area. And so it kind of like that teen horror kind of thing. And so you kind of already had this camaraderie in the beginning with them. And I think that really carries the movie too, in terms of just caring about the characters, which is a huge part of a horror film, at least successfully horror.
Yeah, I think you're right. In a way, the stakes almost seem higher in the sense that, like, especially like when you look at Aliens and Alien 3 to some extent, it's sort of like you said, this repetition of Ripley sort of going into a space and either kind of knowingly or coincidentally, oh, there's aliens here, crap, But you're right, with Rain, we start with a character who like is trapped in a horrible place and wants to get out, and so we build stakes for her that feel separate from surviving the aliens. There is something else going on in her life that she wants and needs, and she has relationships with other characters already. They're not, like you said, in almost every alien movie, it's a bunch of strangers who kind of get thrown together. I mean, aliens, the Marines know each other, but Ripley doesn't know the Marines. In this movie, we have pre-existing relationships, especially between Rain and her robot friend, and yeah, and so it feels, when we jump into the world, it already feels more complete, and this, like, I think that, so the stakes feel a little higher.
It was nice to root for the whole group, and again, I'm coming from Aliens, and Prometheus, and especially with Alien 1 and Prometheus, like there was, core people in the human group, at least we thought they were human at one point, that were antagonistic, right? That there were people that were actively working towards, bad things to happen for not only the group, but like the universe, what I mean? And so I think there was something nice about having the full group being at times maybe naive and maybe immature, but never like malicious, never, and I think they did do, I do want to say, I really liked how they handled Andy's character. I thought, obviously artificial intelligence and aliens are like, it's go hand in hand, doing something with AI. And I thought, for one, I liked how they introduced him, and they introduced him as what you thought to be like a special needs kid, and then you find out he's a robot. I thought that was a great way to garner sympathy for him,
Mhm.
especially when everyone's coming from these other alien movies where they turn out to be bad most of the time. And then I thought, honestly, his arc was really interesting. I really liked the way what they did with him and the kind of the journey he went on, kind of going bad, being infected by like the Wayland Yutani like protocols. Like I thought all of that really worked for me. And I was a fan of how they handled the AI part of this movie, I guess.
Terminator, Predator, and Aliens kind of all do this kind of weird thing because they're kind of all, monster horror movies, similar time period, similar directors, those kind of things, similar actors. And so they kind of share a lot of elements too. And to me, I picked up a lot of like Terminator 2, right? We have instead of now Alien 1, bad android, Aliens, good android, we're going to mix and match them. We're going to go
Right.
back between good or bad or good to bad to good again, and I thought that was interesting, and it also allowed the actor to do some really good acting,
He
and you
was
can
great.
really
Yeah.
see that shift in him. And speaking of androids, we can kind of dive a little bit into some of these callbacks or those kind of things. How do we feel about things like seeing Ash, the Prometheus, or it wasn't Ash, it was Rook, but the same. It was Ian. I can't think of his name now, but same actor, right? And or likeness, and those kind of things that are kind of referencing the larger world. And do they feel like they kind of distracted you in some places, or do they feel like they were just kind of making the world feel more cohesive?
I felt there was a range. It was almost like a spectrum of things, because this is a movie that does fit into a larger universe. Like, even if it can kind of be seen as a standalone movie, we understand that there's this company and there's these aliens and these things that have happened. So, for example, there's times in the movie where they reference Prometheus and the original Wayland and the reason that Wayland goes to this planet. He goes with all these scientists who just want to find new alien life, but he's trying to look for immortality. Uh, and that gets referenced in the movie, and that didn't bother me because I mean, yes, it might require you to have a little knowledge of the other movie, but it's just history, right? It's just sort of saying, okay, in order to understand what's happening now, there is a context that goes back before this movie to things that happen in previous movies. And I don't have a problem with that, that just fills in gaps and things like that. Um, then you get to things I think more in the middle. Where maybe they're sort of in between. And I think your example of Ian Holm, who was Ash in Alien and now is Rook, I had mixed feelings about because I didn't feel like we needed it, but also like there's sort of a way in which it makes sense that there is this line of robots and they're all designed the same, they all look the same, they all have sort of the same speech patterns.
Well, that's been established, right, with David and Walter, I guess, right, in Covenant, right?
Okay, yeah.
There's two. He plays two androids of the same kind.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And so, I could sort of see it, but it started to bother me a little bit. And then to me, then I get to the sort of extremes where, again, these fall into two categories, but one is to literally take lines of dialogue or moments and repeat them exactly. At the end of Alien, Ripley famously says, this is Ellen Ripley, the last surviving member of the Nostromo, signing off. And we literally have the exact same line at the end of this movie. And then we get all these little plot points, plot references to other movies, and sometimes they're exact. Um, in Aliens, there's a point where Ripley gets trained by, forget the name of the Marine that she sort of has a little, bit
Yeah.
of feelings for, but he trains her how to use the Marine, like automatic weapons, and then
Ultra.
and then we have a very similar moment where Rain is getting trained on how to use the rifle too. And then she's even told, there's only 450 rounds in this gun, which is the exact same number of rounds that are in the guns that have been set up in Aliens to protect them. At the end of Alien, Ripley has to crawl into a spacesuit in order to survive. And at the end of this movie, Rain has to crawl into a spacesuit in order to survive. And I feel like those kind of callbacks and references to the movie, to the other movies, to me, they feel like too much. It's not, I mean, like, I don't understand why we need those. I mean, they seem like, again, these little Easter eggs or something for fans of the movie, but like you said, it for me, it just takes me out of the movie. I'm a fan of those movies, but I just want a really great Aliens experience. I don't literally need references to lines of dialogue and sort of remixing of plot moments. I get when you're making movies that are in the same universe, you're going to have a little bit of that, but sometimes it just went too far, and it's happening a lot in cinema, and for me, it's getting a little old. I wish the filmmakers would just trust the audience. Obviously, if you haven't seen the movie, you're not going to understand those references anyway. But for the people who have seen all the movies, I don't think that they're going to like Romulus any more than that, because of those references. If anything, to me, they're distracting and they're going to make me like it a little less. So that's my feeling. I'm curious to hear how you guys felt about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. I think the most egregious one was "Get away from her, you bitch." I think
Yeah,
also, it's like, how do you know the alien's a female? It was kind of directly implied in Aliens because she's a queen and she's laying eggs, but like stuff like that where it feels it kind of dilutes the coolness of some of the things that happen throughout the universe, right? It makes even Ripley's thing less special in Aliens, if you care about that kind of thing. But
right.
again, it just feels like it's a weird thing to be like, okay, so I don't know. It's a weird callback. It doesn't feel natural. His delivery was interesting and different, of course, because of his character, but those kind of things stick out to me. I know some people have said they really like that, not so much me. But I'm right there with you for the most part. And like I said earlier, even Alien Isolation, the end of the game is you have to eject your ship because it's going into a star. The space station is going into a star at the end of Alien Isolation. And so it's like that Alien Resurrection. Basically it's the alien human hybrid at the end of that movie. And then we have it's like a straight up horror film, 2/3 of the movie, and we kind of get into a little action, like it's aliens all of a sudden. And it kind of feels like there is some kind of tonal things there that are kind of, competing a little bit against each other. Again, I still really enjoy it. I still think it's like an
Sure.
8, 8.5, 9 out of 10.
Yeah, yeah.
It was like it could have been a 10 out of 10. It could have been like the perfect alien movie. But they just didn't quite nail it.
It's interesting, thinking about references and thinking, like you said, Bruce, coming from Deadpool and Wolverine, which was almost exclusively references.
Self-referential, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but it works because they're doing it on purpose, and we're all in on the joke, right? Like
Yeah.
we're all supposed to be being pulled out of this movie every 5 minutes and thinking about something else. Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if it's, again, like I've only seen Alien and Aliens once, and so these references, I got them, but they didn't necessarily, for one, I didn't catch them all because I've only seen them once, so I don't remember that's a line from Alien. Like I know you all were. But for two, I think, because I was probably only catching every other reference, if not every third reference, it didn't seem egregious to me. But like, I wonder if it is just the amount of them that makes it kind of like where you're just constantly getting them and it's constantly referencing different movies. And I think, like you said, it doesn't feel natural. There's a way to do references. There's a way to do it in a way that feels like, that reminds me of what happened before. Like, again, the first half of Force Awakens, I think, is a great film. And I think is a really nice, like, reintroduction into a world you've always wanted to get back into, but it's been 50 years. And, like, you're getting to see some things that you recognize, but they're not just rehashed until Starkiller Base. But I don't know. I wonder if that's what it is. It's just that, like, if they had just dialed it back, if it wasn't as many references and it was just a couple, I wonder if that would have worked better.
And I think the key is, you said, how you do it, and it's kind of interesting because if you watch Alien and Aliens, you actually do see a lot of repetitions of sort of plot moments and plot points, but they're done in a way where, honestly, I don't think I even picked up on them until we watched. So I watched Alien and Alien sort of almost back to back when we did the podcast for them, and I was like, oh, in Alien, like she sets something up and then she changes her mind and she has to go back and change it. And then in Aliens, like she escapes, but then she has to go back and get the kid, and it was
Mm,
like, there are these echoes between the two movies where you see these similarities, but they're so well done and they're also different enough that you actually really kind of have to pay attention to go, oh, that's, they're playing with that same thing. It's sort of the same but different. Here it's the same but the same, it's not the same but different. It's literally the same.
Yeah.
And when you get that, then it's where it starts to feel problematic. But of course, I think this is just part of where cinema's at right now, and I'll mention this article I sent you guys from the Washington Post here, where they were talking about explainer movies and just the idea that the more complicated the world building and the more complicated the mythology, the more people then are getting online and getting on Reddit, and you're generating more discussion about the movie.
which is
Weirdly, the
profitable.
yeah, yeah, and exactly. So it makes it more profitable. It makes more people, if you're generating more discussion and you're generating more talk, then presumably more people are going to see the movie, or they're going to go see it more than once. And it's going to help increase just the buzz around the movie and the profits of the movie. Interestingly, this article praised Romulus for not doing as much of that, and largely functioning as a standalone movie. But even still, all of those little moments become places where people can get online and, like, here's every single reference, and it's just a way that it creates platforms for fans to talk about the movie more,
Well, and
and
I
I get
will
it from
give
a
it credit.
marketing point of view, but it's frustrating from a viewing point of view.
Do you think it's subconscious from the filmmakers or partly studio mandated? I mean, I remember in class, I literally had a moment from Star Wars in my script that we wrote for feature, and you guys were like, "That's Star Wars," and I was like, "What are you talking about?" Like this come from my brain, So like,
I think it
yeah,
had to be on purpose, and I think well, I do give it credit for that. Like I don't feel like any of the Easter eggs, like if you didn't get it, you don't get the movie, kind of thing, right? Like there was nothing about the plot or the characters' arcs that you needed to understand any previous movies to kind of connect with and maybe follow along.
Well, yeah.
Right,
And
and so I
they don't slow the movie down
no,
either.
and
So for
that's
example,
yes,
yeah, I'll just say, like, when I went to see Force Awakens with my wife, she had seen the Star Wars movies, but she wasn't a huge fan. She didn't really know them. And so, like, every time an old character came back, here's Princess Leia, here's
Han and
Han
Chewie,
Solo.
yeah,
It was almost like the movie ground to a halt so that we could have this
yeah.
magnificent entry of the new character, and she was just like, it just got kind of old. And then certainly the movie's not doing that. It doesn't slow the movie down. It doesn't stop the movie so it can sort of revel in its referentiality. So you're right. I do think it doesn't interfere on that level. It does keep the flow keeps going pretty nicely. And I think that is to its benefit that it doesn't go too far in that direction.
Yeah, I think, but and I guess from a studio perspective, I get the direction. Hey, we can have both. Hey,
Right.
what if we make a movie that just people like and a movie that all the fanboys will just like, you know, feast on, you know what I mean? And so like, I do understand the desire to, because I guess what I hadn't thought about, and I want to read this article, is about how much more profitable that kind of movies are becoming in Hollywood. And like that's an interesting that's I don't know, that's an interesting reason why it's probably happening more, I guess, like that versus like it's just what our audience's tastes changing, you know what I mean, kind of questions. And so like I don't know, that's yeah, I don't know, that's a very interesting part of it, I guess, angle of that I hadn't really considered.
well, personally speaking, I spend a gross amount of time watching these videos where they're like, here's how things connect, even though I probably know most of them, or here's, references you missed. Like that stuff it is fun and it's addictive. And it's also it's another way. It's like one of the coolest. I've always said this to Daniel Bruce is like the best thing about Star Wars is talking about Star Wars. It's not really watching the movies so much. It's about like everyone being in on it and like
Right.
appreciating the movie kind of thing. And I think that culture, like Star Trek and Star Wars, it got just blew up because of the internet. And I think that it's addictive to find like-minded people who like similar things. And it becomes a fun game of like, did you get that? Oh, you didn't get this, and let me explain it to you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
also, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That makes perfect sense. And it's interesting too, because in some ways I think there's just competing interests going on because at its very basis for a long time, Hollywood movies have been about narrative first, right? That
Right.
is even what we talked about in class is like invisible editing and not calling attention to things other than the narrative so that you could get lost in the story, right? But every time you get one of these little references, you get tossed out of the story briefly because you connect it, again, maybe a history lesson, but connecting history doesn't take you out of the story, but hearing a line repeated or just redoing the same moment in a slightly different way, I think pushes you out of the narrative. So in one way, you could argue that it's worse for the movie. On the other hand, obviously you can argue that, like you said, that it generates more conversation for the movie. I also think depending on how it's done, like if you get to the Marvel movies, I suspect for a lot of people who went to Marvel movies, and like again, I can talk for my wife, like half the time she had no idea what was going on in a Marvel movie, even though she saw a lot of them with me because she wasn't watching all of these other things that connected in. And so she's like, I don't understand what that thing is and I don't care, and I think it got to the point where it was so much about building a universe and creating all these connections that maybe for a casual movie viewer, they kind of stopped caring. Like, I'm not going to know what's going on in these movies, so I'm not going to go see it, So I don't
Yeah.
know. Obviously, I
Yeah.
mean, the studio's got to be weighing those kinds of things.
Well, and,
Well,
and to some degree, some fans do want the references. My
Yeah.
example is I don't know if did you watch Star Trek Picard, Bruce? Any of
Hmm.
that?
Yeah.
Um, the first two seasons of that show are trying to do new things. Now, there's still plenty of references. And to be fair, I don't think any of the writing was good. And so, like, when you don't have a good stories or good performances, it's going to undercut any good ideas you might have
Yeah.
had. But I didn't like that show really at all until season 3 when it just
They brought
became
all
a
the
reference fest.
right.
All it was just references over and over again. And part of me going into it was like, I mean, the kind of the zeitgeist narrative was they kept giving us Picard, and everyone's like the classic fans were like, this is not what we wanted when we wanted
Yeah.
Picard. And then they finally give it to us in that season 3, and it's not amazing. It's not
Right.
a groundbreaking story, but it's also the most enjoyable season of Picard for me. And it's
Yeah.
the one that gave me what I wanted. I wanted to see Worf with a batleth. I wanted to
But that's
see,
the thing. It wasn't just references. It was actual characters, right?
You're right.
Which I
You're
think
right.
it was almost the whole cast. And that brings up something interesting too, which is nostalgia, right? Which
Yeah.
is that sometimes these things can work because we have nostalgia for the past, and that split between wanting the nostalgia for what we had, but also wanting something new.
Yeah.
Is tricky, and I'll give the studio some slack for that. It's tricky to find the balance for that, and I think we all probably felt that something like The Force Awakens got the balance wrong, in not giving us
Yeah.
enough of a new story, and just sort of
Yeah.
retreading old story,
What do you like? Star Trek,
Yeah.
the J.J. Abrams Star Trek. That's probably
Yeah.
a good example, a better example of finding a way to honor the past and do something new and actually narratively justify it. I
Yeah.
did really like how they used time travel to be like, no, that all happened. This, you know what I mean? So you're right. There's a way to do it right. But man, it's seeming like more and more of a very small needle to thread that.
Well, the big danger is one, most of these big studios want to do what they call four quadrant movies, right? Where they're hitting every corner of the market, right? And what you do is when you have 30 something Marvel films and 15 TV shows, the movies start becoming diluted, right? Even the color palette of the movies start getting really washed out, and like they have less color in them. Like you go back and watch like the first 4 or 5 Marvel movies, there's more like richness in the colors, and there's more risk, and they weren't so worried about being connected. I mean, they were, but they weren't, right? And then
Right.
as we get further and further in, it's like you watch the Marvels or you watch this, and it's like they were all shot by the same cinematographer, it feels like. And
Yeah.
so, and that's because they're wanting to appeal to people like your wife and my wife. I took her to see the Marvels, and I was like, "Did you like this?" Because she hadn't seen nothing prior to
Yeah.
that movie. It was the second Captain Marvel movie. She's like, "Yeah, it was fun," and like, I had a good time with it. And like that's the level that Marvel's at the moment is trying to hit. Is I had a good time with it,
Yeah.
not like something, the French Connection or what we talked about recently, or
Yeah.
something like even like an Oppenheimer, where it's very specific and what it's trying to look like and feel like in the tone, those kind of things. Whether you like the movie or not, it's specific. Um, so anyway, yeah, I think that's the danger of it, and finding that balance
Yeah.
is the key. I
Well,
will
and
say, I think, well, the last thing I'll say is I think the benefit of this is that they got all the references out in this movie. Like, what more could you reference, right? And so I think that if this did generate enough buzz for new watchers, then that's good for the franchise in terms of longevity and getting more things, hopefully, that are good. And maybe the next one can be a little more risk taking. And still, like, I mean, the cinematography
yeah.
was amazing. And
Yeah.
so I'm hoping the next one will be like the perfect alien movie.
Well, yeah, and I agree. Overall, this movie, I think, got the balance right a lot more than movies we've seen, and I think it can appeal to new fans, which is something you pointed out when we first came out, that I think it can generate a new set of fans while at the same time retaining the older fans. And I haven't, you guys can tell me, I'm assuming and hoping that there'll be a continuation with some of these characters. I mean, Kaylee Spani is a fantastic actress.
Mhm.
She's great in Priscilla. She's great in Civil War. I would love to see her continue being sort of the new Ripley and building, a couple more movies around her. I think
Yeah.
would be really fantastic. And if they can be at the level that Romulus is at, like you said, minus a little bit of the references, let's hope she's not joined by a bunch of Marines in the next one,
Well, I was going to ask, I just saw recently that Alien Earth, a TV show, is
Yeah.
is on the way.
Next,
So I was going to
yeah.
just see if you guys had heard about that and what your thoughts were going
It's
into it.
next year. It's the same, and you'll like this, Daniel. It's the same showrunner as the guy who did Fargo on Hulu. And
All the seasons?
I think it's the
The
same.
that one dude that like does them all. I mean, that's
Yeah, I'm pretty
Fargo's
sure.
very good.
Yeah, and so from what I understand, the execs love it so far, and that he pushed a Bible in the beginning. It takes place sometime before Prometheus, but also is not really going to reference those. There's an
So it'll
article
be
about
the
that yesterday.
earliest event in the
We
Alien
don't
genre.
know. There's some confusion online right now, but
Oh.
that's coming out. I have good faith in that, just because it feels like the right players are involved. And as
But
far as
let's hope that it's a separate thing again, you know
I
what I
hope it
mean?
is. I hope it's
Let's
not
hope that you
connected.
don't have to watch the TV show to then go make sense of the next movie and things like
Yeah,
that.
that's what from my impressions of his response yesterday, that's what it was, is that it's its own separate thing. He even talked to Ridley Scott, was like, "Hey, I want to do my own thing," and
Yeah,
what. But Romulus, I think at the moment it's tomorrow or this weekend will pass 300 million box office, which makes it the second highest grossing Alien movie, not adjusted for inflation,
yeah,
behind Prometheus, I think, which made like weirdly over 400 million, even though people really mixed reaction about that movie. But it looks like we're going to get more Alien movies, and it's Aliens kind of back in the zeitgeist a little bit at the moment with the show
yeah.
next year, this movie, and yeah, I think we're going to get more movies with these characters, and I'm
I
very
hope so.
curious for sure.
Yeah.
Daniel, how can listeners write into us?
Listeners, you can write into bit.ly/241mail and let us know what you think or thought of Alien Romulus. I would love to know your thoughts from the experienced Alien viewers and the newer ones like me. Were you as miffed by the constant references as my two co-hosts, or did they pass by you a little more unnoticed? Let us know. bit.ly/241mail.
And if you can't hit us up at our Bitly, you can always find us in the comment section below, youtube.com/@2for1studios. It's the best place to consume all the content. And Bruce, how can our listeners find you and all the cool things you do?
They can find me at thehutchfiles.com, which is my Substack site and newsletter. So you can either just go there and look at breakdowns and other things I've done, or you can even subscribe so you can actually get it in your email box whenever I do a new breakdown or anything else new.
That's awesome. I really enjoyed this shorter version of this pod with all three of us.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can do more like this in the future. And I do see maybe when the next Alien movie comes out, we can break down Alien Romulus on a script level and just kind of see
Okay.
what it looks like then. Maybe a couple of years from now, who knows what will happen. Bruce, thank you very much for being on the podcast and truly appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed this quick 40 minutes look at a movie. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
My name is Donovan Thompson.
I'm Daniel Wingfield.
I'm Bruce Hutchinson.
And we have spoken.